I'm Mina Malik Hussain and you're watching The Coffee Table. And today we have such an interesting topic, and it's one that we haven't really talked about before on the show. So, doubly excited. Today we have two lactation consultants who are going to be having a discussion with us about the work that they do, why is it important, and why breastfeeding is a journey that's not so easy for a lot of women. I think that culturally, maybe even around the world, there's a certain narrative about motherhood and how breastfeeding comes naturally to everybody, but it actually is a surprisingly much more difficult and challenging journey for a lot of moms as well. And we don't have that many lactation consultants in Pakistan either. So this is a sort of, two-pronged approach that we're taking. You get to meet some lactation consultants and you get to learn about the work that they do. And maybe this will help some moms out there on their own baby raising journeys. So I'm delighted to be welcoming today across the internet, joining us from Karachi, Dr. Zohra Kurji, who is the first nurse running a lactation clinic in Pakistan. And she works at the Aga Khan University, where she is an assistant professor at the School of Nursing and Midwifery. The lactation clinic is run in collaboration with the OBGYN and the nursing departments, and she is a certified lactation consultant. And joining me on set today, across yonder on the sofa, is Hareem Sumbul, who is a certified lactation educator, counselor. She has received a distinction in human lactation from the University of California in San Diego. She is a member of the International Lactation Consultants Association and the Lactation Consultants of Great Britain. Hareem has completed over 100 hours of lactation-specific education, and to her great credit, runs LactNation, which is a Facebook support group of over 13,000 breastfeeding mothers. Welcome to the show, Hareem.
Thank you for having me.
And Dr. Kurji from across the internet. I'm laughing because I'm just really excited about this, because there are a lot of myths to be busted here, and there are a lot of really important, I think, journeys to be shared here. So I like to begin at the beginning. What does a lactation consultant do?
So, and I think Dr. Kurji would second me on that,
yes.
But for me, the way I look at it, a lactation consultant in any credential, whichever credential you take up, is basically an augmentation position in any hospital or in any healthcare facility. This is a position that augments the functioning of, let's say, a pediatrician. For instance, pediatricians or doctors, they're trained to treat or deal with disease and illness. They're not necessarily nutritionists, or they're not necessarily psychologists, or So it's basically a specialized field for all matters lactation, because as much as sadly, we don't really talk about it, or even doctors don't really study it in as much of a length, which they should, I mean. But this is an entire function of your body that goes on, and it happens in every woman's body, right? It can happen even without a pregnancy. That's also one thing that people usually don't know, because the hormones that take care of it, they're not really pregnancy related. So it's not your ovaries and all of that. The hormones are managed by other organs of the body. So primarily, this is something that is another science in its own, and it's very swiftly improving. People are researching, they're talking about it, they're very aggressively working in this field around the world. Unfortunately, I mean, like you mentioned, we don't have much exposure to this field in Pakistan. People don't even know what a lactation consultant is.
Quite right. And I wonder if it's like a chicken and egg situation where people don't know because there aren't that many consultants to begin with. So then you aren't really aware of, that this is actually a thing that exists, A, and then B, it's a facility or service that you can actually, avail. So, Dr. Kurji, you are associated with the Aga Khan Hospital and the university, and that's where you work. So, it's interesting that you run the lactation clinic between kind of two departments. So, it's two departments, their forces combined to create this lactation clinic. So, can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you do with the clinic?
Yeah, so thank you for giving the opportunity to talk about it. So, just I will give you a little bit overview about how this lactation service initiated, and and I can share since 2007. We three pioneer nurses went to US to train as a lactation consultant, and it is a international board certified lactation consultancy. Out of this, beside me, one more is still in Pakistan, and she's also now in the process of certifying her credential for Khan University. So because the demand is huge, once we have started this service, this is the only service which take up very fast. So every clinic is so busy, and it was out of expectation that women will approach for the breastfeeding issues, and they will give the extra money to just come and to just seek the help. So this is very limited amount of money. Hospital have kept it only in the purpose of whereby the woman can get the extra support from the lactation consultant, so they can support the mothers. So now beside the clinic, I'm also teaching more 10 lactation consultant training is on. So we are in the coordination with international body of lactation resource, education resource, and whereby we are the local facilitators, and 10 lactation consultants are still in the process, and soon in the next year they will be ready. So that much demand, we can think over it, because if every woman will need the support, that means few lactation consultant would not be enough to provide support to all who is coming to the hospital.
Right. And also with lactation consultants, it's not just somebody kind of showing you the ropes, isn't it? It's a very sort of complex relationship that a mom has with their lactation consultant. But before I get into that, Dr. Kurji, when is the right time to find a lactation consultant? Like, what would you suggest for an expectant mother?
I have seen around more than 150 from August. We have started this service. Until now, I have seen 150 mothers on floor and in clinic as well. Yeah. So when I see mother in postnatal phase, it's really difficult for them to understand the science of breastfeeding, which Harim talked about it. Because obstetrician will look for the uterus, and then pediatrician will look for the baby. Yes. So who will look for the breast,
Yes.
There needs to be somebody who can talk about the breastfeeding, because this is the connection, because lactation consultant will assess the baby and assess the mother as well. So there should be somebody in between who can assess the both, and then advise mother or plan the care in such a way that mother can be on the right pathway for the exclusive breastfeeding, which is 6 months, till birth of the baby, age of the baby. So the antenatal pregnancy time is the best time to consult, lactation consultants, because that's the time when, you just plan your goal, what is your goal? Either you would like to go for the breastfeeding or the bottle feeding. And then support groups, which Harim is also already initiated by the Facebook page, is really important in terms of connecting all the mothers so they can learn from each other. So support group is important, and it could be start from antenatal time where they can sit together. And I always say the breastfeeding is a teamwork. It's not only the mother's work. Absolutely. I always talk about it, it's a teamwork. So be excluded out of this talk. They need to be understand so they can support better. Because I always, reinforce this to mother that, if they will be in the problem, they'll ask father to go out and bring the formula and bottle in. So at that time, she needs reassurance, she needs support. So it's a teamwork. It's a team goal rather than individual.
Yeah. I love it. I love Reem. You've been sitting here nodding, vigorously that it is teamwork. It absolutely is. And it's so ironic because I think that when we don't talk about breastfeeding because everybody feels very squeamish about it. And they're like, oh, it's private and nobody should see you and you should like secrete yourself in a room somewhere. And I'm a mom of 4. I've nursed 4 babies. So, by the time you reach your last baby, you're like, it's okay. I've got this. but how can you? But the thing is that it's not as simple. And I think, and so tell me more about a lactate, because from what I understand, and Dr. Kurji said that one should look for a lactation consultant before your baby is born. And you should be thinking about these things that, do I want to breastfeed at all? How long do I want to do it for? And these are also considerations, and I feel like a lot of doctors don't have these conversations with expectant mums.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. And at this juncture, of course, fed is best. And we are not shaming anybody who doesn't breastfeed or has chosen not to breastfeed. So I'm just putting it out there. But because this show is about lactation, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I imagine that the relationship that one then develops with one's lactation consultant is actually a really close one.
It is.
And that's where the teamwork begins to happen.
Absolutely. But to start off with, I usually always respond to fed is best with fed is necessary, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? If you don't feed, then you don't have a child. I mean, that kind of ends there, the entire conversation there. Yeah. So I find that argument a little like moot. So there's
I've been mooted.
Fed is necessary, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's just that, apart from that, when I think Dr. Kurji mentions teamwork, it's not, yes, it begins with the lactation consultant, but the real teamwork comes from the immediate surroundings of the mother.
Yeah.
The husband, the family, people who are around them, if they will not give the mother respite for, let's say, the first month or so, like our culture is so beautiful with we have the chilla and everything, we have the 40-day thing and all of that. Looking at it from a lactation viewpoint, that's such a beautiful thing that gives a mother respite from the housework or other chores or other things that she has to do and take care of her own health and the baby's health and all of that. And that really helps in the process of lactation, right? So there's that. Plus, the relationship with the lactation consultant, yes, it should begin, as early as your pregnancy, really. Because like I mentioned, I was talking to you earlier as well, that I am a lactation educator counselor, and it was part of the curriculum that I studied, that we had to develop entire course outlines and, actually do mock sessions and all of those things for prenatal breastfeeding workshops and all of that. There are actual hands-on workshops that you actually go ahead and do. So it's very important, and that's what I keep telling people, even on the group, the pregnant mothers. I keep trying to engage them in conversation, if I'm not going nuts over the posts. But it's
there
just
are a lot of posts.
a lot of posts.
Yeah.
But that's what I keep trying to convince them, that I don't see the pregnant mothers as active or as engaging in conversation as those who are actually going through trouble. Because if once they come forward and they pick up something to talk about, or they learn from there, they will be able to prevent those things. And one of my clients who took a prenatal session with me, I do one-on-one sessions, and she took a session with me, and she actually wrote on the group about it as well, that I thought that going through the group and going through the troubleshooting, I know everything about lactation. However, when I took this class, it's a whole different world, because you're looking at things from a very different viewpoint when you're trying to prevent those issues from happening, right? It's a very different ball game,
and
right?
it's really important, the idea that it is possible to go into this situation fully prepared.
Absolutely.
and having sort of tools and knowledge at your fingertips in a way, to be able to anticipate things that might happen. And I think that, again, a lot of times we have this idealized notion that, of course, you give birth to a baby, you start feeding the baby, done. But, there is much more sort of, going on behind the scenes. We're going to take a very quick break and come back to this wonderful conversation. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're having a riveting conversation about breastfeeding with lactation consultants Harim Sumbul and Dr. Zohra Kurji. So before the break, Harim, we were talking about how lactation and breastfeeding, a lot of times, well, I think for a lot of people, a lot of mums don't expect to run into trouble. Because if people around you have generally, everybody's nursed their babies and it seems like everybody's just done it, then there's this sort of idea that I too will also just do it. But a lot of times, a lot of moms are not able to just do it.
Right.
But why is that?
Okay, so another viewpoint of this is that there are not as many nursed babies today. It's very, very common that the minute someone walks into a wall or any kind of like an impediment in their way, they are suggested to switch to formula immediately. The issue is not really resolved. It's not even looked into. They're just given an alternate, and that's how they usually move forward. So unfortunately, not many people are surrounded by people who've nursed. Not today, not in this day and age, not right now in Pakistan, right? And even those who have nursed, for instance, if we talk about our mothers or our, mothers-in-law or whoever, they've nursed more than 20 years ago. You don't remember what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago,
That's
right?
true.
So, and honestly, I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and the only reason why I remember most parts of it, because 20, 40 times a day, I am reminded of those things because I work in the field.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's so much that I've forgotten, even in 3 years. So it's important to understand that we're not really surrounded by, a lot of people who are knowledgeable about nursing.
Yeah.
And the issues that we come across, some will be, physical, anatomical issues, which need some kind of tweaking and maybe a technique or something, doing it a little different, that will fix the issue, right? And then others will be circumstantial, right? So there are certain things that you need to do immediately postpartum. There are very tiny little things that if taken care of, it can help in a very smooth breastfeeding journey, right? Such as, for instance, exposure of the mother to the child immediately after birth, within the first hour, let's say,
skin to skin.
Skin to skin, and the natural way of birthing and lactation, moving on from birthing to lactation. It is that the baby is taken out of you and they're placed on your belly. It's literally called the belly crawl. Every baby is born with 8 to 10 reflexes that help the baby nurse on their own. So they crawl up the mother's body and they latch on their own if they're just you let them be, on the mother.
Wow!
And that's the natural way. That's the way it's supposed to happen. And in that latch, you never usually have to worry about whether the latch is deep enough, whether it's all right, whether he's latching okay or what, because it's the natural latch. A baby will be, and I saw these videos from my own baby's birth. I saw these videos when she was taken to the nursery and she was there. And once I studied lactation, I could see that she was giving all of those cues. She was sticking her tongue out. She was, kind of trying to suck her hands, and she was yawning. The yawning reflex is meant for the baby to latch onto the breast.
Because they're opening their mouth really wide so that they can.
We also say that do not wipe the baby's hand because there's amniotic fluid on that, and the mother's breast is emanating that smell, so that leads the baby there.
Wow,
so all of these things
beautiful.
these are very little things. Unfortunately, skin to skin is not a practice that is used in most hospitals in Pakistan.
That's true. They just whisk the baby away. And Dr. Kurji, do you feel like these are also things that, because your clinic runs in conjunction with the OBGYN department, are these things that you've been able to kind of point out to obstetricians and gynecologists?
Yeah, so the skin to skin, Harim, I agree with Harim that, skin to skin is a very natural way where you can, the baby can find her own way to find the breast and they can start latching on. And so in Aga Khan Hospital, we do practice skin to skin. The first latch is usually do on a delivery table. And then whenever I visit them, mothers, to their room, and I find if the baby is having some of difficulty, that baby is sleepy or baby is not ready to latch, I just ask mother to just give the skin to skin. It's a magic thing, within 20 minutes, baby's alert, baby's awake, mother is happy, latch is good. So it's just a magical thing, the mother can feel and they respond back, how you did it, it's a magic in your hand, or it's something like that, but it's nothing done by me. It's all natural thing which I just reinforce them to skin, and not only with mothers. Like kangaroo father care, which I always ask father to just give KFC, and then they relate the KFC with the other food. And I said, no, not that KFC, it's a kangaroo father care which you need to provide to the baby. So because that also increase the behavior of breastfeeding behavior among the babies. So especially those who are the preterm babies, because here in Pakistan, we have a huge ratio of preterm babies, which we are not talking about. And if mother is having some issue, not producing enough, so the breast milk is the only survival for those babies who are preterm. And that's why we have a huge infant mortality rate here in Pakistan. One of the reason is not having the access of the breast milk, because in West there is a milk banks, the mother go and they donate the milk banks, but here because of the also from our religious perspective, there's some limitation of sharing the milk. But believe me or not, that is the survival where if the mother is not producing, they are looking for the milk, they are asking family to donate something, and then we don't have the milk banks, and there they find really the parents' limitation, from where to arrange the milk so they can give the breast milk, because there's a chances will increase if the preterm baby will get the breast milk. So from this channel, I really would like to say, to reflect back to see if you have enough to, or if from Islamic point of view and from other cultural aspect, if you can able to donate something within your family, even think about it, if the preterm baby is there. So that is important.
So how does breast milk, how does breast milk benefit a preterm baby so significantly? What's in breast milk that helps so well?
Yeah, because it's lots and lots of probiotics, If you study the immunology composition of the breast milk, you cannot find any composition in the top milk or the formula milk. Right now, every company who's making this formula milk, they have not. You cannot compare the composition, because the protein which is there, it's a very easily digestible, and then gut is not that much mature with the preterm babies. So if you're giving the formula, they can have lots of gut infection, which may lead to mortality, and then pneumonia is very common in the preterm babies, which is one of the causes is not having the breast milk. So those babies are really depending upon only the breast milk. And one observation which I have seen in the other hospital, like I have also visited the government hospital. You will not believe, in those hospitals, on one delivery table, there are more than one woman, They don't have the place to give the skin to those babies.
Yeah.
And we within the country only 30. Yes. And the exclusive breastfeeding rate in Pakistan is only 37%. So, and we have 44% children are stunting, they are malnourished. So, it's a huge thing which we need to invest on, investment of lactation, or the counseling, or the breastfeeding counselors, or the champions. Trainings are important in terms of giving the knowledge, and then they can support the mothers.
So Kurji, why? Because you run these clinics and because you are working with the hospital, you probably have a sort of pretty broad spectrum of people who come to you. Why are people not breastfeeding as much as before? Do you think that it's do you think that women are generally finding it more difficult to do it? Do you feel like the formula lobby has become really strong, or it's just convenient, or it's just become fashionable? Like, what do you think is going on here?
Three things I can comment on it. First, the environment, as Harim said, in our environment majority, we have seen the formula feed. So if you look at the dolls, which our girls receive very first, the Barbie dolls and the other dolls, they have a bottle in their mouth, right? How many dolls, if you can see those, they are sucking, it's a battery operated. So it's coming in their mind from the childhood, that the bottle is the one which, they will introduce once they have their own babies. So that is really important in terms of, and then our own curriculum doesn't talk about it. Not even in the school, like we talk about the puberty. It's very common, right? So we should talk about the nutrition part, because these are the mothers, future mothers. They should know about from beginning. So our school system needs to have some concrete curriculum to prepare the women. And we are talking about the Journal Pakistan Community Women, which are in the schools. So how we are preparing them towards nutrition, and it's their role is a major role. And then, of course, now we can see, as Harim says, 20 years back, now we have lots and lots of medical condition. I have seen many women with the polycystic ovarian. So they do have the issue, challenge to produce the milk. I have seen many mothers now with the diabetes. So non-communicable disease is very common now, So that is one of the factors. Thyroid is very common now with the women. That's why they have, insufficient milk syndrome. So they need extra interventions. So that population is increasing. So that is also one of the reasons which needs to be, addressed. And early intervention needs to be start with those mothers who are having some sort of medical issues. And then, of course, working population is increasing, and we don't have any place at work to express the milk, because I have seen in my clinic women only how to stop breast milk, because now they have to start the job. So where they will express in the bathroom or in where they will keep the breast milk. They don't have the break hours. We don't have the maternity leaves. So these all are the issues, and the support environment is important. If we will not provide them, they will not able to sustain the breast milk or the breastfeeding.
Yeah, and I think these structural issues are massive, because if, for example, if exclusively nursing your baby till 6 months is the best possible thing to do for them, but your maternity leave is only 3 months, then what are you going to do? And if you don't have a pumping room at work and you don't have anywhere to store your milk, how are you going to do this?
So this is something that I come across literally like 10 times a day on the group, and this is something that I, so I will come up with jugards and things that they can do. See, because I have worked in the corporate sector for 20 years, and I have been part of the executive committees, part of the management who have been able to make changes and do things for these people. And back then I was single. I mean, I wasn't even a mother. So, there was... it was a completely different world for me. I didn't even know these things existed. All I knew was that these women want to do something and they should be allowed to do that something. So one thing that I always would bring up, and I would suggest, I mean, any viewers who are talking about it or who are listening to this and who want to talk about it at their workplace, I mean, really just compare it to men's smoke breaks. I mean, men would take like every half an hour, they'd go for a 15-minute smoke break. This is like every 2 or 3 hours, a mother literally just needs 15-20 minutes.
Which is
in
like
a
2
room.
cigarettes.
And you can really, if it's like, even if it's 3 hours, you can really, being an accountant, I will get into the math of it, but it is just, dividing your day into, let's say, even if 3 times a day, a woman takes a 20 minutes break or a 15 minutes break, and there is one conference room or one even a storage room that you can spare, for the purpose, you really just need a chair and a table. You literally don't need anything else, they can carry their pumps.
It's not rocket science.
There's nothing that
to make this happen.
There's nothing that any employer needs to do extra, going out of their way or doing. And I know, having worked on that, sitting on that side of the table, they do a lot more for their employees, a lot more, to retain them, to keep them happy and all of that. And that is the core function of HR in a place. So that's what I usually.
The teamwork is sort of many-faceted beast.
So it's just that that's what I usually suggest to mothers when they're going back. A lot of times, employers don't know what to do for them, right?
So as a mom, you need to ask also.
Okay,
we're going to take a very quick break here because, it's extremely absorbing, and we'll come back in 1 second. Stay with us. Hi, Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're talking to lactation consultants Dr. Zohra Kurji and Harim Sumbul about the many challenges that we face as nursing mums. So Harim, you run this group. It is a wonderful support group, and there's so many women, and I am on it too. No, not because I need it, but because I like to be there and give support. So tell me about the sort of major anxieties that women have whilst nursing their babies. Because I've noticed that a lot of women will be asking, how do I know that my baby is, if their stomach is full, or if this is enough milk?
Which is why I literally just created an entire unit that explains that these are the signs that you need to look for. So a lot of times, and 90% of the time, maybe more, and I'm just really just eyeballing that number, not really coming up from some statistic.
Okay. Accountant hat can be put aside.
But it's, most of these issues, they come in from, baby behavior. People are getting, they get a little worried when a baby wants to nurse more and more, or if the baby is not latching correctly or letting go. There's a lot of baby behavior related stuff that people misconstrue as having a lack of supply, whereas a lot of times the baby is cluster feeding,
right?
Which is a term that anyone can look it up.
But what is
but cluster feeding is when the baby is they're approaching a growth spurt, and it starts very early after after birth, and when they're approaching a growth spurt and they're working on your supply to meet their need, let's say next week or next month, when they're a bigger baby.
It's an anticipatory thing where they want to nurse frequently because they're actually
working on your supply, because it's a supply-demand thing, right?
So the more the baby nurses,
the more they remove milk from your body, the more your body gets signaled to produce more.
Excellent.
However, what happens is that we get flustered that the baby needs too much, and we're not able to give them much because the baby just nursed, and they're 10 minutes later they're asking for more. I must not be producing enough. That is the major anxiety that comes in. And that's when we make the mistake of intervening with any kind of artificial milk or whatever, right? So that's where the issue comes in. Because if you intercept cluster feeding, that then naturally takes your supply. Like when the baby is older.
So you're basically interfering with a very instinctive process that you should not meddle with, and it's okay. Like
let the baby nurse.
Just let him do it, let it roll. So does that mean that a lot of times in these situations where people are like, just give him a top feed, then that's not actually necessary?
It's actually harmful in two ways, because the baby is going to get full, but the milk is not going to be removed from your body. So your body is not getting that signal to produce more.
Soon, which is what you want.
Soon the baby will be a bigger baby, and then your supply really won't meet up his need, meet his needs, right? The second thing is that they usually use bottles for that. And bottles are as normalized as artificial milk is, right? And what bottle feeding does in any amount, even I've seen babies, the baby ends up rejecting your breast.
Because whether it's just easier.
It's easier, it's literally milk being poured into the baby's mouth. So they stop working hard on the breast. Some babies will reject it after one bottle. Some will take like a few months. Some will even go up to 10 months. But, feeding both ways. But it's just that it's such a high risk that it can literally happen any time, So, there are alternate methods. There are other ways to feed your babies till they're 4 months, 6 months old. And then you can switch them onto a cup or a sippy cup, and that's perfectly normal.
So that's interesting that you can feed your baby with a cup. Even as young as
newborn. That's the thing. And I would, Dr. Zohra would be the best person to ask, because she's into nursing as well. The nurses know these things. Every nurse is trained to do this. They're doing this in the NICUs. They're doing it all over the place. So,
but Dr. Kurji, tell us about cups. Because basically when you give a baby milk from a cup, you're not making, the nipple confusion doesn't happen because they're just using a tiny baby cup.
So there are different methods, that you can prevent from nipple confusion, and cup feeding is one of out of it. And one is also the finger feeding, the finger feeding is
what
also,
is that?
You can insert some, very thin sort of tube in your finger, and then you can put it in your mouth, and then from the syringe you can slowly, gradually push it. So that we usually do with the NICU babies. So because their sucking doesn't develop early, so in that way their sucking develop, and something is you can artificially feed those babies, so they at least know about, and you can also save their energy, because in preterm babies we need to save the energy, because breastfeeding is hard to suck, and you're also worried about their weight, but you are also worried about not to give the top feed. So these are certain sort of methods we usually introduce babies. And yes, cup feeding, but not directly from the cup. Spoon and cup is important. So
Dr. Kurji, is spoon and cup feeding for, let's say, full-term babies, is that a standard practice in a lot of nurseries and hospitals, or is nobody really does it unless you specifically ask? Because I'm wondering about sort of, nursery culture also.
So, if you're actually, if your hospital is baby-friendly hospital, you should not have any sort of top milks, specifiers. You should not have any bottles around it. Only you can offer the room-in practice. And room-in practice is that mother and baby needs to be, baby should not be in nursery, but with mother all the time. So, the breastfeeding can initiate, and mother can, learn, and the nurses can support them. So, in that hospital, if baby required some sort of top milk or express breast milk, then only they introduce the cup and spoon, not the bottle. They don't ask mothers to bring the bottle, because then they are initiating the confusion. And I have seen mothers from different hospitals in the clinic whereby they don't have any knowledge, and if the bottle is introduced very next day to those babies, so they start rejecting the breast, and then the parents, and then they are really concerned about it, that why somebody doesn't talk about it before, and now baby is rejecting, and everything is messed up with them.
Because now it's already handled. What do you do? And the thing is that it kind of sucks that as a layperson, one has to kind of be armed with this knowledge so that you can go in and prevent it, and whereas your healthcare provider should be telling this to you as opposed to the other way around. But okay, well, now that you've seen this show, you will know. Don't give your newborn a bottle, because it's perfectly possible to feed them without a bottle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, the thing is, the way she mentioned earlier, the way Dr. Kurji mentioned earlier, that bottles are normalized by babies, by, toys and all of these things. My 3-year-old saw her first bottle when it came with a toy, and she didn't know what to do with it. She's like, Amma, what do I do with this?
Like, what is that?
What is this? And I was like, beta, just throw
never
it
mind
away.
that.
Never mind that.
Chuck it out the window.
So, it came with a pacifier and bottle, 2 artificial nipples, which cause nipple confusion. And
so sort of coming back to anxieties about nursing, do you feel that a lot of moms are pressurized to nurse, and then when it does, again, like coming back to that idea that nursing is easy for everybody, but it often isn't. And then why isn't it? Why is it easier for some moms to nurse and not that easy for other moms to nurse?
Thank you for asking that question, because, I will now whip out my feminist hat.
Yes!
So, what I personally believe, and even as a lactation professional, is that a mother needs to have her own way. It really is her decision whether she wants to breastfeed or not. I mean, or she wants to breastfeed for 2 months, 1 month, 1 week, 6 months, 5 years, I don't know, whatever. The breastfeeding journey is about the breastfeeding dyad, which is the mother and child, and no other person should have a say, not the doctors, not the pediatricians, not the, OBGYNs, whoever. It's really the mother's choice. And when we kind of meddle with that idea, that's where anxiety comes in, like everything else. The clincher here is that here we are, talking about a woman who is already high on hormones, and, she's in a bad space, she's very raw, so, it's the early days postpartum, as you would remember, even if the wind blows another way, you would cry.
Yeah. Basically, and you're exhausted, and your body is a wreck.
Yes.
And then it's really hard.
You're being told to do one thing or another, whether or not your body is ready for it, or you are ready for it, or things are going the way they're supposed to or not, right? So yes, that does add to a lot of anxiety, where breastfeeding physiologically helps, and with the hormones and endocrinology related issues and all of those things, it helps with anxiety, it helps remove it or reduce it. All of these environmental issues and things that surround us, they actually push a mother towards anxiety a lot of times.
And then anxiety then kind of interferes with your supply, and it interferes with your bonding with your baby, and it becomes a kind of really nasty, vicious cycle.
Really? So, okay, stress does have an impact on your supply, but it's usually temporary and not very long lasting.
Okay.
But, if you're constantly stressed and if you're constantly anxious, obviously that's going to have an impact.
Do you feel like on your group, do you get women who want to breastfeed and are doing it, and they're figuring it out, and they're really keen on doing it, but they have family pressure not to, and meddling and interference? And
you will make me cry, because I deal with these cases every single day. I started my own consult in September, and up until now I've done like over 70 people in my personal consult, and in the group, of course, there are over 13,000 women. This is a regular routine that they're being pushed to either introduce formula or stop breastfeeding altogether, because it's very strenuous for the rest of the house.
Why?
It's just that, everybody seems to... See, the thing is, it is teamwork.
Yes.
So everybody does get affected when the mother is also upset. So coming from their viewpoint, they don't know enough to advise better, right? So which is why a lot of times I also ask them that if your husbands are willing, they can join the prenatal breastfeeding sessions, because they're going to learn a lot as well.
Absolutely.
You can't do this. And I mean, I remember when I used to nurse, my husband knew that he had to come and hold the water bottle to my mouth.
Yeah. Because you should drink lots of water while you're nursing. Drink all the water.
Because I used to be parched the second she would latch on. I used to be so thirsty. And everyone has a different reaction to it. But these are so many ways that fathers can participate and be supportive and all of that. A lot of times, the surrounding situation is that, oh, we did it and this was great, but you're clearly not capable of it.
Yes.
That's the narrative that is pushed on young girls, and that really breaks your heart, hormonal or not.
Quite right.
I mean, someone telling you that, we did it perfectly well, but you're not really. It's not your cup of tea
or milk, as it were. So from all of this, I understand that to have a sort of a healthy and happy breastfeeding journey for a mom and a baby, support from everybody else is really important.
It is very important, and above everything else, because as women in Pakistan, we are facing adversity on all levels every single day. So what I like to do is I empower the women with knowledge. I want them to know, and that's what I keep telling them, that I can't come into your house and solve your social issue. You need to take care of that. Right? You need to develop and grow as a human being to define your own boundaries. And this is a sad time to be doing that.
But it's all right. Any time is a good time.
Yeah, you need to do that. But what I do give you is the knowledge that makes you confident on the idea that you're doing the right thing. You're not harming your child, because that's on top of your
that you're
your mind, that you're starving the baby. The baby is not going to grow. There's something terribly wrong that's going to happen.
And this idea that every time a
child.
baby cries, it must be hungry. Like, no, there are lots of reasons.
A lot of reasons.
Cry.
That's the way they communicate.
Yeah. So it's not always that you better feed it.
Absolutely.
But
it's always a good thing. Every time the baby stirs, give them.
Yeah. Come on.
Give it to them. Give it to them. It's never a bad idea. It always works.
Thank you so much, Hareem. This is like a conversation I could keep on having, but unfortunately, time is time. Thank you, Dr. Kurji, for being on the show. Thank you guys for watching. As you can tell, we need to have maybe like 10 more shows on this. Like, if you want to see more of this, let us know in the comments, and if you're watching this on YouTube. I I tried to do one of those things. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Coffee Table. Bye now.